Some fireworks have happened in the crypto space. In my opinion, is that this is very exciting, though most of us probably aren't feeling excited right now. Now, Bitcoin just broke lower, breaking down below 17K, and possibly will go down further. We'll talk about some of the causes behind this, and we'll talk about why I think this is so good. And we will cover some of your altcoin picks. Welcome to the Crypto Rain channel. I'm your host, Jay Ray. And if you like money in crypto and you're looking for a seasoned investor's take on the crypto market, join the Rainmaker family. Now, I'm not a financial advisor, neither is Paul, who's joining us from Definity. I'm a crypto investor myself. Paul invests in many markets. We do want to thank our Patreon members. Our private Discord gets access, or Patreon members get access to our private Discord, where every Friday we do a pre-stream, and I interact with those members much more directly. So we do have a free Telegram, and the link is below. Now make it rain on that like button, strap in for the show, and let's welcome Paul from Definity. Paul, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here as always. It's definitely a volatile market, and there's a lot to get into. So, yeah.
Yes, it's been an interesting couple of days, like gripping, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's been some fundamental news that obviously you know more about than I do that's caused a kind of skew in the whole of the markets, because everything seemed to be going in a risk-on fashion, i.e. I think we were gearing up for a potential rally, and actually that got stopped in its tracks. So there is definitely fear in the market, but fear in these lower levels could represent longer term opportunity if cool heads can prevail. So we'll see what the shakeout is. But to be honest, I'm really interested in what you make of what's going on as well, because these are things that need to be unpicked from a fundamental point of view as well as a technical one.
Yeah. And it's a lot of fundamentals that have driven this. I remember I heard the name Sam Bankman-Fried for the first time March of last year. And it was one of my friends. He's like, oh, he's a genius, and he's the founder of FTX Exchange, which I had heard of. And I learned that, he ran Alameda Capital. And so he had risen to a huge fortune in a very short amount of time. And I was like, wow, it is possible in the crypto space, but his was so much faster than even some of the best investors that I knew. And so I was like, wow, okay, well, maybe he does have a secret formula. Well, we're learning that there was maybe some things going on. And what's interesting is Big Boy's channel has been covering for the last month that Sam Bankman-Fried has been lobbying against the interests of most of the crypto space and for KYCing all the decentralized wallets. And there was a really good interview with, I forget, someone else who was talking with Sam Bankman-Fried, and he was like, well, so what if your country came to you and said, you have an email and we want all the email providers to make everybody who gets an email with them fully KYC before they can email. Would you agree to that? And he's like, Sam Bankman-Fried's like, no, I wouldn't agree to that. Well, what if they said the argument is, well, we're concerned that they'll start communicating with terrorists, and so we have to KYC everyone so that way we can know if they start communicating with terrorists. And he's like, no, I wouldn't agree with that. He said, well, why would you agree with KYCing all the decentralized wallets out there then? Because they might end up interacting with terrorists. And he didn't know what to say, right? But he had been lobbying for making all the decentralized providers provide KYC, and he had actually been bashing Binance and some of the other, what I feel are good players in the space, to the regulators. And it was really interesting, and I was not extremely pleased to hear what he had been saying and what he had been lobbying for. Well, Binance, which I do like CZ from Binance. I remember when Binance was new in 2017, they also had a meteoric rise. But I really feel like most of the decisions that I've seen them make over the past 3 years have been win-win situations. that they have tried to make wins for themselves at the expense of making wins for their users. CZ went to great lengths to continue to add value to his token. So his token was one of the things that they sold to raise funds to really get Binance started. And he continued to increase the use cases for the token over time, giving those that had invested in the token and believed in Binance some really, really nice returns. And I appreciate that from a founder, because once they got the exchange where they were making billions of dollars from the exchange, they could have just not really done much to improve the token use case, but they continue to find ways to improve the token use case. So all those initial investors that were still holding the token did extremely well over time. And I like that about him. And I follow those kind of moves. So yeah, I think perhaps he recognized Sam Bankman-Fried as a threat to the crypto industry. And so he made some moves that, well, looks like it led to the fall of FTX. The rumor is that FTX is an exchange. They have a token, FTT, that can be used to offset fees on the platform. But what's been being said is that they will they'll create a bunch of the FTT token. They'll then hand it over to Alameda Capital, and then Alameda Capital will then collateralize that and get a loan against it. And so essentially, they've been printing off a bunch of their FTT tokens and then borrowing against them. Well, the problem with that is essentially they're taking leverage against their tokens that they're printing out of thin air. And there's a liquidation point, right? And so supposedly that liquidation point was at somewhere around $22 or $21. And so when CZ, who had been an initial investor in FTX, part of the settlement, they had gotten like $2 billion worth of the FTT token. Well, the value of that had fallen all the way to 500 and something million. But, they moved over those FTT tokens and they talked about it. And I think that caused some scare. So as Binance liquidated all their FTT tokens, other people did too. And that actually made it fall below that threshold, which put FTX into some problems that they then weren't liquid. This is one of the big problems with leverage trading, why I advocate so strongly against it. So as an exchange, they had borrowed against all that capital, and so they were at threat of being liquidated. So Binance said, so there was a deal struck that Sam Bankman-Fried would sell FTX to Binance. And so that's still pending, though it seems like the deal's done. There's a due diligence period. And so they may look in the due diligence. They may back out of the deal. It might not be. There might be a lot less there than under face value. And if there's tons of leverage behind the scenes, well, then it would make sense more how Sam Bankman-Fried supposedly had grown so rich so fast that, if it's an exchange, they were, I guess, printing off tokens and then borrowing against them and using that to buy more. Well, that house of cards tends to fall, especially in big pullbacks. So we'll see what we learn about that. But Sam Bankman-Fried, he was backing some new legislation that was fairly anti-crypto. And gosh, that caught me off guard. I was like, how can somebody from the crypto space be even backing these ideas? This is very antithetical to the whole ethos of crypto, and really made me start questioning, what are these guys' basic beliefs and premises? And of course, the route he was backing seemed to back those centralized exchanges over decentralized exchanges. But here's the interesting thing. FTX is now FTX froze withdrawals from their exchange. Now, why would an exchange ever have to freeze withdrawals? Because they don't have enough capital to give everyone back their assets. But why in the world would you not have enough capital to give everyone back their deposits? Unless you've been spending them in some way. unless you've been investing them in some way or you've been hacked. So Mt. Gox supposedly crashed because somebody hacked and stole a bunch of the deposits. I've not heard any rumors of FTX being hacked. So was FTX a centralized exchange, which he was pushing for centralized exchanges to control more of crypto because they're safer, and yet they're not necessarily safer. Because why would they have to pause withdrawals unless they were using those funds in some way? Why are those funds not there? They should be there. So yeah, we're going to learn a lot more. And as Binance does their due diligence, they get in there and find out those funds aren't there. And CZ from Binance kind of alluded to that when he said that they're working on this new thing to verify on chain that all the deposits are there, which would be awesome. I mean, that would be like if the industry started self-regulating that way. I mean, that's something regulators would like to see. And that's actually more secure than what you see in Wall Street and everything, because we could use on-chain metrics to guarantee or for people to be able to see that all those deposits are there. And I think we would all like that, because banks don't even have that, right? Banks are leveraging against their deposits, but crypto exchanges shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's there's going to be a lot to unpick and there's going to be a lot of rumors, and until the dust settles, obviously the market is going to be under a bit of a cloud. But I think from the long-term perspective, once this all shakes out, it's like one of those big problems that the market always solves eventually. And when it comes through the other side, the whole system will hopefully be stronger, I would say. But obviously in the short term, it just doesn't feel great at all.
Yeah, and well, I've been looking to see if there would be another big shakeout before the market is fully ready to run, right? So one of the big things before the market is ready to run is kind of it has to dash everyone's hopes and get everyone way down and really suck the last bits of life out of anyone who's been surviving. And then it's usually ready to run. And I didn't feel like it was quite there. And so this may be that. And I'm hoping it is, right? That some people, it creates this general dispirited feeling that, oh my gosh, there is no hope for crypto. And that's actually the point when there is actually the most hope. And that's usually the final capitulation point.
Exactly.
And so I would love to see this be the final capitulation point. And it's too early to tell, So, it's wicked down to 17,000 on Bitcoin. If you don't mind, we'll pull up the charts and have you walk us through what you're seeing and where are some of the support zones you might hit after this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the general picture, we kind of left the door open for one last move down, and I was hoping that we wouldn't have to do that, because we were seeing, if I can go to the equity markets just first of all to show you what was happening in terms of risk on.
Sure.
So if we start off so this is the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is 30 stocks. And that blasted higher. Everyone's talking about a crash in October, and it just went straight up like a rocket. And then we had the disparity between the Dow and the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq was under a bit of pressure. So we've seen a general re-rating in everything that's tech. Part of that is maturity of business, I feel. A part of it is when you come out of a pandemic, when governments are actively spending money, helping platforms make even more money, and everybody's stuck at home. Of course, everything's going to be valued much more highly, but eventually people want to go out and live in the real world, and that's kind of what we're seeing now. So there's lots more competition out there, and without getting into the debate about messages that were given over and people who were cancelled on, say, platforms like Twitter, and how you can't post stuff on Facebook and YouTube, there's been a proliferation of other products out there. And so we've seen all of that happening, which is obviously going to fragment the market and create more competition. So that's not great for the main player's point of view. But that doesn't mean the businesses are necessarily going to go anywhere. They're going to just take time to change and look for new advantages. So the Nasdaq's been under pressure, which is obviously keeping a bit of pressure on the S&P 500. So you've got what we call value coming into play, where value is stocks that would normally provide a dividend. They have solid but boring businesses. And you've got growth stocks, which are obviously the tech stocks, which may not make very much money, but they have a huge potential future gain. If you think about Amazon in the early days, when it was just spending millions of dollars trying to create its business, and then later on, when it's all set up, they have this huge monopoly, which is hugely profitable. So that kind of re-rating has been going on. But if we look around at, say, some of the quickly at the European markets, you can see they've been doing okay. So the European stock markets have been pushing up. The some of the even the laggy ones have been pushing up higher. The UK stock market is not that far off its high of 2022. So there's some risk on things that are going on. And against that backdrop, I was expecting there to be a upward phase in Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now, if we go to the short-term chart of Bitcoin, this whole phase here is, we've been asking the question, is this a base or is this some form of continuation? Now, we got this acceleration in price action, the short-term flag or pennant formation that it broke out from last week. But if you take a step back and look at the big picture, it still hasn't formed a base, and it wouldn't do until we got through 25,401. I think I even said on the show, why would you buy it, through 25,401 as opposed to buying it here, when you think, well, it's so obviously much cheaper here, you'd buy it here as opposed to waiting. But the difference is, from a technical point of view, this is confirmed a base. Now, you can jump into any market at any point in time, as long as you realize what risk you're taking at that point in time. And as I've said, you need a parachute level if things start to go wrong. Now, unusual price action like this, where it's starting to accelerate up and it just stops and reverses down, is uncommon, but it's not impossible. And that's why I try to put in levels where I would bail out if things go wrong. I was hoping that we get a little bit more warning as it approached these lows, that we could say, look, this is flirting with some levels that are looking dodgy, and we should either trim positions or cut back to zero and look for lower levels to get in. But it all happened extremely quickly, which is, just the way of the market, unfortunately. But the upside is that this kind of long-term picture that we've had on the back burner, where this looks more like now a large descending triangle pattern, it brings in support that comes in between 13,880 and 14,715. Now, 14,715 is a Fibonacci retracement, so that's a very interesting level if it gets tested. So between 13,880 and 14,715, I think that is the main kind of shut your eyes, kind of buy with a stop, or that's what the market will do. I'm not saying that that's what people should do, but that's what I think the market will look for. Until that happens, I think we need to regain, at the very least, even getting over 17,592 might not be enough to actually have us look at the long term and say this is time to get back in. I think we would have to be extremely cautious until this downward resistance line is breached, because this is now looking like a massive descending triangle, and we need to break that pattern of descending highs in order to reverse that situation and make this look more like a base. So this area is definitely of interest. And to actually look at the markets in a slightly more positive point of view, we are seeing Ethereum, it's still way above its previous low. I mean, it's not touched its 2022 low. And I'm quite encouraged by that. And there have been some individual altcoins that have done well in the face of what's gone on. And those are the ones that will likely bounce back much quicker. Now, in terms of the macro position, if we look at the 6 month, 2 year, well, let's look at the 2 year. This is the 2 year bond yield, US government bond yield. So this has been going up in a straight line. This is all inflation driven. It's all fears about inflation. And I think it's nearing a top. There are signs that the market is topping out, but it hasn't actually topped out just yet. And this is generally putting pressure on the market. The 10-year is one of the most important markets that we look at, because 10-year money is used for mortgages, for businesses that borrow longer term. And this has been giving a potential topping pattern. It's consolidated for sure, but this could well be topping out here. And that is encouraging. So major tops do take a long time to form. They're not usually over in a week or 2 weeks. It can be a month or maybe even two. But if this becomes a major top and we break this 3.84% level, then it's going to be huge risk on opportunity, and people will be piling back into Bitcoin and other crypto assets. Another thing to point out is that we're recording this on Wednesday, the 9th of November, but on Thursday, the 10th, there's the US CPI number coming out. And it's my guess that that's going to be weaker than expected. And this could really drive a risk on rally in all the markets. So things could turn around pretty quickly. But as far as the dollar's concerned, it's been caught up in this range now for quite some time. From towards the end of September, it stalled out. It had its last run towards this 14.77. So it didn't quite break 15, but it's going sideways. And that's been at slight odds with yields that have continued to go up, but not 10-year yields, just the 2-year and the 6-month yields have gone up. So the market is asking the question, when is the Fed over? When is it going to stop raising rates? And the fact that Facebook and, well, actually, it's not Facebook, it's Meta has decided to let go about 11,000 employees is telling us that the market is hurting, like it's broadly hurting. And we're seeing that in some of the price action. Are they going to keep raising interest rates while the economic circumstances have deteriorated? And the answer is probably not. And I think if inflation numbers come in better than they expect, which I think they should, because commodity prices have fallen, everything that measures the metrics have fallen, then there will be a huge re-rating. I think what they're doing in the very short term is listening to what Jerome Powell said when he said that they're far from over in terms of raising interest rates. So people have gone, okay, they've got loads more to do. But I think the nuance for me there is, yeah, they may raise interest rates, but they're not going to be doing it at 0.75% or, 3/4 of a percentage point clip. They're probably going to be doing something like 0.5% or maybe 0.25 and finessing that final move. And the market will get very excited way ahead of that. So is it possible that we're going to see a big rally from now? It seems a bit unlikely given that the market is still quite nervous overall, because the decline in the NASDAQ stocks has caught some people completely off guard, and they are buying into that. So that could have a little bit more to run. But as far as the longer term positions are concerned, I really do think that we are going to build up for a massive risk on rally. If it has to be next year, it's going to be next year. But there are some great longer term opportunities for those who are willing to sort of buy and hold. Obviously, you've got to be selective, but I think there are some major opportunities coming up, and that's for sure. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to put to bed the whole of the risk off scenario. And this is, as you say, is the final capitulation that just shakes out all the weak hands and the people who were just in it for a quick buck and didn't really want to stick around in the markets. And those people who are really serious and want to do their homework and stay with the market, they will be rewarded potentially by the ending of this bear trend and some, really good upside in the coming months and possibly years ahead.
Yeah, we've patiently been watching the reversal of the dollar and waiting for the reversal of the dollar. It's not fully confirmed here, but when it does reverse, we'll be looking at a risk-on situation. It's interesting the timing of this FTX FUD that's currently savaging the crypto market. And the deeper it goes, the better it is towards a better reset, because the market likes to flush out all of the leverage to spirit everyone before it is ready to run. And it would be setting up well to be flushing that out right before the dollar, if the dollar breaks below this next level. I mean, that'll be a good sign. It has one more level to break before it then is clearly in a downturn. And then you'll be seeing a lot of capital going back into risk on situations, which would time things very well to set up for a bigger bull run in the crypto space as well as in other areas.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I mean,
I think I agree with your analysis that likely the Fed will start changing because we're starting to see those layoffs, right? One of the reasons they've kept raising interest rates so high is they're like, oh, the economy is still doing fine. We're not seeing layoffs yet. And all of a sudden, in recent weeks, we're seeing some big layoff announcements, and probably we'll see more. And so that will put pressure on the Fed to say, okay, we need to start tapering off on these raises. In fact, at some point, they might start going the other direction, probably in a number of months still.
yeah. And I think it's also important that at some point, China opens up and business starts to return to normal, and the pent-up demand that will be there starts to flow into the the broader market. So when they start buying up again, or when bullishness returns, because those markets have been savaged, I think we'll see an equally strong kind of economy rebound, and that will be good for the global markets. But in terms of the dollar, I mean, just to say that this is still an upward trend, and this upward trend line hasn't broken as yet. I mean, this is so it was a bit like Bitcoin before. We were suspecting it's hit a low, but we can't absolutely say, yeah, this is done. And it's a bit frustrating, but there's more and more evidence that's coming in to say that the dollar has hit the top. We have to leave the door open for an attempt to do exactly what we saw with Bitcoin, where it goes up and just takes out stops, and then everyone goes, oh, it's going to go to 120, let's jump on board, which was the target that a lot of people were talking about. And I wasn't really I was a bit more conservative, looking for 115 as the topping area. Maybe 112 to 115 was the zone, but you can't rule out those stops are building up there. So the market might have a go at it. So we'll see. Tomorrow's number is going to be really important. But I just want to very quickly share. I know we're not always looking at currencies, but one of the biggest down moves, which I think I showed you on the show, was the Japanese yen. The Japanese yen has got absolutely crucified over the last few months, and almost that people were saying, well, why would you buy the Japanese yen? You may as well buy a risky cryptocurrency, sort of tongue in cheek.
It going up, but this is actually
going
down versus the US dollar.
Yeah, exactly.
So
if so, that's
there we go.
So if I invert it, that's effectively what's going on. So the Japanese yen is declining massively. So it's falling. If you were buying the yen, this is what it would look like. Wow. And so you can see here that there was a capitulation phase, and the Bank of Japan have been intervening in the market, so they try and stop it. And usually that's a waste of time. But this looks like it's forming a base. And if we look at, for example, the dollar Canada, this is, oh, hang on, that's not the dollar. This is the dollar Canada. You can see this has made an inverse head and shoulders, and it's now moving up. And so even sterling, where we had this, actually, let me go back to the way it should be, because it gets slightly confusing for me with some of these currencies. So this is sterling against the US dollar. So that collapsed when we had this bad situation with, our temporary Prime Minister Liz Truss and the debacle over tax cuts, which you probably didn't know about in the US, but it just caused a downdraft in sterling and huge panic. And even that's recovering against the US dollar. That was a massive panic zone, but look at it. It's recovered pretty well. That was a great buying opportunity, huge fear going on. Now, of course, it's not out of the woods, but all I'm doing is showing you lots of different areas where there is evidence that the dollar is actually weakening. And if we're not there, we can't be that far away from it. We can't be that far away from the end. And when that end does come in, it could be party time. I know it doesn't sound like it doesn't feel like it, but it could be. So, so for everyone who's still kind of there and weathering this, this is market cycle. Market cycles are like this. They feel awful at the low, and it always feels like it's never going to end when we're at the top. And we will feel like that, like it's never going to end when it's near the top at some point. It's just difficult to find the absolute low.
Yeah, let me share. We're jumping to some of the drama that we went in. This is the FTT token. And can you see where?
Yeah.
in that game, and they were heavily defending this level. See, every time it would hit $22, which we think was their liquidation point, and once it broke through, and wow, it's all the way down to 336 now. If they were printing the FTT token out of thin air, one of the clues that came out, like, I don't know if it's about 10 days ago, seems like it was over a week ago now, was the balance sheet of Alameda Capital. And it listed how many FTT tokens they had on their books. But the value of the FTT tokens they had on their books exceeded what CoinGecko or CoinMarketCap said was the entire market cap of the whole token, which meant, wait, why are there way more tokens in circulation than anyone knows about? And looking at those assets, I think Binance, seeing that leak of their sheet, saw that their balance sheet was illiquid. Not only was that somehow off the total value of the FTT tokens that they were supposedly had on there, but a lot of the other assets they had were illiquid in this market, which I think was like showing the weakness that they were vulnerable. And so once they were able to get the price below this 22, it just got savaged. Now, sometimes people try to buy the bottom, but I'm not touching it, because what is the value of FTT? And you could say if Binance buys it, yes, that's still an if. It's not a done deal. There's still due diligence there. And if the due diligence there shows that it's not near the value of what they would need to pay for it, Binance can still back out of that deal. So I'm not touching their token, even though I like to buy cheap. This is an extremely risky situation. It probably wouldn't decrease as much as Luna did, because Luna went from literally 70 something dollars to 0.000001 cents in a matter of days. Yeah, that value is still questionable. I don't know how to assess what the value is, because I don't have access to their books. But that's what kicked this off. I mean, that's on the daily. If we look at the hourly, bam, it came down, wicked all the way to here. It bounced up, and it's on its way down again. Why don't we take a look over at Solana? If you want to pull it up on your chart, because Solana was one of the big chains being backed by Sam Bankman-Fried. Now, do I think Solana is going to collapse? No, I don't. I think its price is really getting hurt, because Sam Bankman-Fried was a big backer and FTX was a big backer. However, from some people that went to the conference in Portugal, what I still feel bullish on Solana is the amount of developers developing assets and applications on it. Now, they still have some big problems to fix. Their chain, they've had to shut it off a number of times and stop transactions, which isn't a good sign. And we're not very used to that, because ETH, though it's slow and expensive, has worked very, very well for a long time. And some of the other new competing chains like Cardano have not had that same problem. But, if people are looking for a deal that they want to take a lot of risk on, well, Solana, at least I feel, or my guess is that it's, even if FTX completely collapses, goes away, and the deal breaks through, perhaps Solana survives. You just have to decide where your risk and return is, because, yeah, according to that chart, it's still dropping.
Yeah, I mean, the rate at which it's dropping is obviously indicative of how the market's re-rating this. And I don't ever step in when the market's doing that unless there's some very good levels that give you good risk reward. In other words, if you could buy it like 14 and then put a stop at 13.90, so you've got just a very small amount of risk against a certain level. But I certainly wouldn't just shut my eyes and buy it, because it's, as we know, we don't know where the low is going to be. We've seen this sort of price action before. I've seen it in other things. Now, even if this is cheap, I don't mind if waiting until it's in a proper upward trend or has produced some sort of spike or double bottom in order to indicate that the market is settling. in terms of the bigger picture, I mean, look, there is potentially some support around the level that it's at the moment, because that was a consolidation on the way up. It was a small one, but there was more support around here, which is obviously where it held in for a while. But that completed double bottom pattern never really came, and that's the big problem here. So we've got this 200-day moving average, we've got the 60-day moving average. Both of those are still turning down. So even though it was potentially forming a longer term base, it never got confirmed, which was a bit of a shame, to say the least. Now the question is, where could support come in? Where does it become, worthy of like even a short term trade? And I think around 4.88, which is the beginning of this wave, this upward move. If it gets down there or close to it, then I think risk reward would be I would look to buy it with a stop below, but I certainly wouldn't hold it if it got below there, because obviously we don't know where it could go from there. Now I'd hope everything stabilizes a bit, and Solana is usually one of the names of a crypto asset that people talk favorably about. So if there's going to be a risk on phase, I'd like to see a very strong bounce to show that this is just fear, and this is just people the market getting ahead of itself, which it does. It gets ahead of itself on the way up, and it gets ahead of itself on the way down. So if this spikes off and comes straight back, then that's great. I don't mind waiting until it's back over $33 before I think it's a buy, or it breaks a downward trend line. That's cool. For all people who step in and take the risk at these lower levels, if they win with it, that's really great. But I can't do that. So I would say once it shows signs that it's stabilized, and we'll see what those signs are. We're going to look at it in terms of what everything else is doing. So if Bitcoin starts to bounce, if the dollar starts to weaken, if equities are all rallying, and then this has spiked, then I think that's the time to maybe step in. But in terms of pure price, the only major level I can see is obviously 12, because it's at the bottom of that base, and then below that 4.88. So I know that's a big range, but that's unfortunately where it is.
And that's a rough point. If you buy right at the bottom of that base and then it drops all the way to the next level, that's a huge decrease in value.
I mean, that's where short-term trades become long-term trades, which is why I say on these trades, if you're trying to catch a falling safe, which is what you're doing here, what I would do if I ever step in on a level like this, you put a small stop in. So if you get in and you get stopped out, it protects you. Otherwise, the risk is that you get caught in something, and it's very difficult. Yeah. Unless you're just like, okay, I'm going to buy this and take a 3-year or 4-year view on it, and hope that it survives. In which case, that's different. That is different. But you could still potentially get it a little bit cheaper. But if your time horizon is that long and you're not using leveraged money, and then I suppose that's something that people could do. But that's not something I would do. But everybody's different. Everyone's got to do what works for them.
Yeah, we're also we're recording this on Wednesday. This will air on Thursday, and so we may know more about how savage the markets get. We don't know whether this is a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 day thing, and so I mean, we're in crypto always looking for good deals, right? So it's dropped considerably from its high, which was at 259, just under 260. It's now at $14, which is good. But it could break through that support and come all the way down to the $5 mark. And gosh, it starts to get really, really attractive to me around that price. Too good to pass up if it re-enters that range. So I would love to be able to buy it at some of those prices from 2020.
Definitely. I mean, anything's possible, of course, but I can see why you'd be tempted at those levels. but yeah, we need to see the extent of the shakeout. And like you say, it's coming. It's always the way, isn't it? The market is doing all of this just ahead of a really important announcement, data announcement. So, if the number's stronger, if the CPI number's stronger, then we have the inverse situation where actually there will be buying of dollars, there'll be more selling of equities, and there'll be a bit more to run in this phase. So it really is quite a crucial week. But I still stick with, I think it will be a weaker number, and that will support it, and there will be some bargain hunting very soon. But with things like this, knowing the existential threat to some of these coins, I would definitely need to know a bit more about the fundamentals before just jumping in.
Yeah, let's take a look at some viewer suggestions for us to look at. Now, if you have some suggestions up to two altcoins that you want us to look at, put them in the comment section below. We do give priority. Sometimes we get a whole lot of comments. We give priority to those that write some fundamental details about what they like about the token. And so if you write, gosh, as much as possible in the comment section of what you like about it, we will give priority to those. So let's start with ANKR, ANKR.
Yeah, so I've just switched over to that. This is, I don't think we've looked at this before, but we may have done, obviously, because there's been quite a few. So this is still in a downward trend. It formed a bit of a base here. It was sort of off to the races and then hit up against key resistance, which has kept this downward trend in place. Now, unfortunately, it's also taken out its 2022 low, which is not a great sign. And so it's still, from a short-term perspective, in a either wait or sell zone. But there is some important support coming in very, very close, which I think we should be keeping an eye on. So this is one of those potential nibbles with a very tight stop below, because this is major resistance, and major resistance often inverts to major support. So I'd say wait here, because it's still below this trend line. It's still under pressure, and obviously macro situation is not great. But at 0.018, that is the sort of level where I would put a buy point in and a stop below, just because of that resistance, which should reverse as support. Now, from a longer term perspective, so you might get a bounce out of that. So I can't say that the trend is over there, but that would be an interesting point. Where it would be really not great is if it went through 18, continued to this support level, which I think would be the final point where I'd just throw in the towel and say, okay, no, I'm not. Even if it bases there, I still have to have a level where I'm wrong, and I get out. So that would be at 0.013. But I think from a longer term perspective, we need a little bit more than just a support level to turn the trend around. So I would use this downward resistance line as a break point to tripwire into a longer term trade. So in order to break it, it'll have to go at least sideways for a while, and then recover some support. So short term, yeah, I think it's going to fall further. It's approaching a very interesting support point, which is, I think, why you asked about it. Stepping in with very limited risk is an interesting proposition, but that doesn't necessarily change the long-term trend or this trend just yet. So I'd still be cautious, even if it does respond at that level.
So if I were to summarize what you're thinking is, chances are it'll bounce off that line and at least come back up to that trend line, but we're still in an overall downward trend. And so if you were to take a trade on this, it would be a very, very small buy and probably a quick sell if it bounced back up and got anywhere near that trend line.
Yeah, because
summary.
Yeah, exactly. Because what you're doing is you're buying it because it's against a support point. So that's one factor of many that indicate that the market's changed trend. The main factor that says the market's changed trend is it forms what we call a reversal pattern. In the absence of that, there's no reversal pattern here. So there's no need or no reason for me to technically want to buy it or be bullish on it. But I can say, well, that's a really good level. So at a good level, you have to, well, you don't have to, but you can respond to it. But you can only respond from a reaction point of view. Then we have to see what happens next. So a short-term reaction would be good. If it gets as far as breaking this downward trend line, even better. But I think this is one where we'd have to come back to it in a few weeks to see how it's performing and if it's actually held this support zone or not, and see what sort of technical patterns are formed, if any.
Good points. A little bit on the fundamental side. What I like about it is market cap is really close to the fully diluted market cap. So there's not a ton sitting out there that's not in circulation. I think like you, for me, looking at the charts, for me, I used to try to take those short-term trades. I don't anymore, just because I like to hold for medium terms, and I don't like to have to keep near the computer. So for me, it would be just a wait if I were forced to make a decision on this, and I'd be waiting to see some bottoming signals because I don't, where we're at, there's, we're breaking a new low. I don't see any bottoming signals. It looks like there's more pain to come with this.
Do we know what they do?
Yeah, so they're in the DeFi realm. So let me share this. Basically, they've transitioned to be generally in the DeFi realm and to provide some tools. They're providing for Polygon, Binance Optimism, Avalanche. So I don't know specifically what they're presently doing, but supercharger projects with ANKR app chains. So my guess is their bottom is farther down, and I'll probably keep an eye on it. But even still, look at their market cap. Like, they're already, what I do like is so much of their tokens are in supply already. And I've been in the, I learned the hard way about when there's a lot of tokens that a project has, maybe in their economic fund or their marketing fund or whatever, and they sell those to raise funds. Well, they're selling those into the market, and it puts downward price pressure on there. So when they don't have much left to sell into the market, that means they can't dump on your head. Now, you're always concerned, well, if they don't have much capital left to sell or many tokens left to sell, are they liquid with cash so they don't run out of development money? But if they are doing fine and they're not going to run out of development money, it's a really good thing that most of their supply is in circulation. So, yeah.
I mean, it's a great suggestion. Just in a few weeks' time, just put it in again and remind us to have a look at it. So,
yeah, take a look and see if we see some good bottoming signals. Well, let's look at the next one in our suggestions is VRA.
Yeah. So VRA is, I can tell that this is, unless I've got the wrong one, which I don't think I have, this is quite a thinly traded market just by the way the price bars are coming out here. So I would say there's not much trading volume, or it's a very small kind of cap crypto asset. At the moment, there's not much data to go with or to analyze, because we've got that from March 21 till now. That's all the data. Now, at the moment, the trend is still down, as you can see. So it had an attempt to break higher. That failed. If there was going to be some form of base, it should have held in around 14th of September, come back and taken that resistance out, which would have been a great double bottom or something of that nature. But it's still very soft. The rallies have been muted. It's not showing any impulsive strength or any signs that the market is showing interest in piling into it. We want to see some really vigorous, sharp upward candles or bars, whichever you prefer to look at, to indicate buyers coming in. The inverse of what's gone on here, really. So you see a sharp move down. We'd like to see a sharp move up as the market says, wow, this is a fantastic opportunity, and it's just got too cheap. Now, that said, and that bearish setup said, there is support close to where we are now. So this support zone here was a consolidation in February 21, and we're entering into that now. So my guess, and it is just a guess, that we'll probably trade into the lower end of that range and then have a bounce. But whilst it's in this phase, I think it's definitely a wait. And again, I think this is one where it'd be interesting to know a bit more about, and perhaps come back to it to see whether it's managed to hold this support. But a simple trend line on this will tell you when we should be thinking about buying it from a long-term perspective. And that's the line there. We can draw an extended trend line that comes in from this point as well. So we can draw a line from there now. So it needs to get through both of those as tripwires for a longer term base. But yeah, but thanks for letting us, analyze it.
Yeah, this is a good one for us to look at. Veracity, so I've kind of followed them passively for a little while. I like where they're in, right? So if you think about where Twitch has gone with streaming of games and advertisements. So what they're trying to do is create like verified video ads that actually are going in front of viewers, right? Instead of going in front of bots. And I think this is a realm where there's a lot of money. I think a lot of video games are going to go towards the crypto space. So they're in a good niche with like esports. Essentially, think of a competitor to Twitch. Now, some disconcerting things. One of the viewers told me that they had increased the cap, that essentially most of their tokens were in circulation already. And they essentially increased their total supply by like 100 million. I found some articles that alluded to that. I didn't find a definite one confirming that, but it seems like what he was saying was correct in that. See that now the whole circulating supply is 10.34 billion, and so literally only like less than 10% is in circulation. Well, it seems like what they might have done is run out of funds. So then they propose that they're just going to increase the total amount of tokens by another 100 billion. And essentially they have control of those tokens to be able to raise money. If that's the case, it might end up being a good thing in the long term, meaning what would you rather have if you're holding their tokens, them go out of business because they ran out of money, or for them to kind of savage you a little bit by just printing off bunch more tokens, which then can hurt the value of what you have. Well, if it was they were going to die and go out of business, I guess it's kind of like cutting off your arm to save yourself from the gangrene that was going to kill your body anyway. So it's not really a good choice. Having said that, I mean, this is where we are in the market, and this is a really exciting place to be, right? So we've hit these previous highs that are way the heck up there, and now we're talking under a fraction of a cent in prices. In most of the charts we're looking at, this is what everything is looking like. This is an exciting time to be here, and I know it doesn't feel exciting to be here. And when I started this channel in December of 2020, which quickly led into the run-up, like actually December, Bitcoin was taking off. Then there was January, February, Bitcoin was doing well, Cardano was doing well, and then March, just about everything did amazingly well. It's hard to understand, like when I would try to tell people how it's hard to be around during the crypto winter, and this is what washes out most people, and most people leave, they just dump all their tokens and they leave rather than buy. And people have a hard time looking to the left on the charts and be like, why would anybody sell at those points? Boy, why wouldn't they load up? Well, now you know, because it's hard being around in the bear market because you get bad news after bad news. Some of the stuff that you already bought, the price has gone way, way down. So you're concerned to buy even more. And this is why most people don't buy when it's really cheap, because it might go even cheaper. And you're kind of hedging that fear all the time. And then all of a sudden the prices reverse like the rains come, the sunshine comes out too, and everything goes up, and wow, like everything grows like crazy, and then you wish you had bought way more. Well, we're in that downward savage, boy, it could go even lower part, but this is the part where I get really excited. I'm glad that the prices are getting savage right now, because I think that speeds up how soon the recovery will be. And so hopefully the prices go down even more, because then that just speeds the recovery up sooner. I'm happy with where VRA's price is at. Would I buy some at that? No. No. Would I be buying there? No. It's probably going to go lower. I hope so. I have some. I'm tempted to sell it and hope that it goes lower and buy it back. But for now, I'm just going to wait. I used to take those trades the first time around, but sometimes I would then forget to get back in, and then I would end up rebuying for more than I end up selling for. So for me, it's just a wait.
Okay. I think there's, is there one more?
Yeah, let's take a look at ADS.
Yeah. So I'm not sure again if I've got the right one here, but maybe you can tell me. Yeah. So this is, it trades technically in a very interesting way. It's very smooth, this chart. So I like that. What potentially is going on here is, well, first of all, this is much higher than a lot of other markets at this point in the cycle. So this is up here, whereas most other markets are much further down. So it's a little puzzling, but interesting. Now, what we have here is a classic head and shoulders reversal pattern, which is usually a bearish sign. So it means that the market should go lower, and it's actually just breaking and triggering that right now. So until that gets negated, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say this is a wait. But it's so strange, because this is happening in a market that has, potentially done very well from a long-term perspective. It's really way off its low, and yeah, okay, it's corrected a lot already, but this overall chart to me has it shows that it's kind of much higher from a longer term perspective than many other markets.
Mm-hmm.
So what I like about this is, okay, it's going to go down, but I think it could hit some really interesting technical levels on the way and be a good long-term potential buy. So where I'm going to be focusing is, let's just draw in these horizontal lines here to show you. So there's some support here, just under $1. And then I love this area here, which is where all the resistance has come in. It's 1, 2, 3 points of resistance. Really nice little breakout that kicked everything off. Now that's all the way down at 0.5 cent. Now you might say, well, that's too cheap. And like you was just saying earlier, yeah, if it doesn't get down there, then great. But this overall pattern is a big head and shoulders pattern, and I have to respond to that. Unfortunately, that is a trend ending signal, which means that the downside has to be in play until that gets negated. It will take some time to negate that. It has to get over this neckline, and it's got to be trading over what would be, or what could have been, the right shoulder, which is this area here. So at the very least, the downward trend line needs to be breached from here to here to get us bullish. And that's the main downward trend line that we can draw in the chart. It's not an accelerated downward trend line, but that is a valid downward trend line, because that's really good resistance. Now, if we draw this next downward trend line, that's here, you can see how that's accelerated. The downward trend line accelerates, so you get the main trend line and then the accelerated trend line. When it's at this sort of angle, it can break it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the end of the move, because it's an extended trend line. It's an accelerated line. So therefore, breaking it is not as a powerful a signal as breaking this line. So what I would expect to see is a downward phase, and then the inverse, some form of reversal pattern that gets us back in at a later date. Now, it is also quite possible that this massive top fails and it just goes back up and it comes back towards that trend line and carries on its merry way, in which case I'll be very happy. It would be showing a tremendous amount of strength if it did that, which I also think would be a very good sign. But it does need to break this downward trend line for me from a long-term perspective. And if it does continue to fall, which is what I suspect it might do, then the support levels where I would start to nibble again would be around $1 just below. And the area that I think would be very interesting, as I say, is about 0.5 cent.
Yeah, this one has performed very well, contrary to most of the rest of the market. But things come in waves in this space. Let me share, like, the website is extremely well done. I mean, look how cool they did with this website. Lists the price right here and the market cap, number of ads served. So ad shares obviously has something to do with ad revenue. So they're kind of in a similar space to VRA, except this is probably not specifically to like streaming video game playing, but putting ads in other places. I think crypto offers some good benefits to giving verified ads and putting them throughout the web. Crypto has if set up properly, can track things better. Now, in more openly so that people can see the real numbers. So we'll see where this goes. But what I don't like is where that chart is at, right? So if I had this, I would be selling it. For me, I probably, if I had it, would have sold some or all of it already, because it has been going contrary to the market. And though it sometimes doesn't play out this way, sometimes the spotlight comes off of things and then they go into a huge retracement phase, which is why when things do well, especially contrary to the rest of the market, I usually take profits and sometimes take all my profits out into the sidelines. But if I still had it and I'm looking at this head and shoulders pattern, I would realize the rest of my gains and I would be selling. Even if I believe in the project long term, I've just held those reversals before, and it's not fun finding out how low they can go. All right. Well, that's the suggestions. Thank you to the audience for those great suggestions. Those were a lot of fun. And sometimes you put on our radar some of the things that you've been hearing things about and catching things at some very interesting points in the charts. So thank you for those suggestions. And thank you, Paul, for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Well, yeah, the crypto market, there's a lot of pain going on right now. And though, like, this is what I was talking about when I was saying that most people don't stick around, that most people don't have the patience to make it rich in crypto. This is the patience that it takes. And though it's frustrating, it gets you worried. This is what March of 2020 felt like when all the prices went down, and then they went down some more, and then they went down some more, and it was like gut-wrenching how bad it hurt. And this just feels like the first couple days of that, and there were several days of pain. It went even further down than that. And so it has a similar feeling to me, which is why I'm overall very excited. That doesn't mean that I think the prices are going to bounce back today, maybe by the time you're watching this, but this may be putting in the bottom. And I hope that's what happens here. Feels like it did in March of 2020. And if you look back at the charts in March of 2020, well, it ended up being some really big lows, but that was the bottom. And then we had a long climb up from there. Thank you all for joining us. This wrap is for all of you. This reinforces the principles that I've used to go from thousands to millions in the crypto space over just the past 4.5, 5 years now.
Came into the space chasing all of the gains, chasing the pumps and all of the hype trains. But like in life, you buy before you could. Was told to buy when it was pouring like a rainmaker should. I buy when it's down, don't chase the boats that I miss. Cause I always make the time in mind. I stick the one out cause I'm patient like that, and I'll wait for the right time. I sell when it's high, I buy when it's low. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm just a rainmaker running the show. Calculated investments, I don't leave with my heart. The principles are simple, they're leaving a mark. Buy when it's boring, just gotta be smart. I sell when it's hype, like all the channels they pump it. That's when I was selling, got parabolic to dump it. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes it time fly by, years going so fast. The game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Time is never better, but time like the present. This next 5 years is a gift and it's feeling like heaven. I'm committed to learn, studying to know that nothing comes easy, but with knowledge the game show. Sticking out this road could soon become a bear market. Learning and growing, and when it's slow would be the target. Naysayers come out, Bitcoin is dead. The massive decreases can get to your head. Sticking around, the time is better. Strong like that, I'll let the others be fretters. 2 years time, the ball will bring back the gains. That makes it worth the effort, cause here comes the rain. So let's go rainmakers, let's make it all happen. Let go of the hate, let the haters be crapping. I'm here for 5 years, let's do this together. The time is right, the time could be better. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes it time fly by, years going so fast. This game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Haters be hating, the time to slow down. Addressing what they say when I'm wearing my crown. They're chasing green candles like someone who was new. I got a vision that was bigger, helping me to push through. I'm still human and sometimes it is rough, and that's what makes me special, simply I stay tough. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not relying on luck.